Vivian Wyatt had spent 5 months watching a door she was not supposed to watch, counting a man she was not supposed to know, building a case against a duke she had never met. And on a Wednesday afternoon in October, standing in a Bond Street milliner's shop with a length of dark green silk ribbon between her fingers, she felt the whole careful architecture of her patience begin to shift. The ribbon cost 4 shillings. She had not bought anything for pleasure in 5 months. She set it down, picked it up again, and tried to remember what it felt like to want something small and harmless. Something that had nothing to do with account ledgers or Thursday deliveries or the man her father had trusted enough to write to before he died. She could not quite remember. The shop smelled of fresh straw and lavender water, and the light through the window was the particular gray of London in autumn. And Vivian Wyatt, 25 years old, daughter of the late Leonard Wyatt, forensic accountant and younger son of Sir Geoffrey Wyatt, Bart, stood in a hat shop on Bond Street holding a ribbon she could not afford and felt, for the first time in 5 months, the weight of how much she had given up to be right. Behind her, a voice spoke. "You must be the woman at number 15. Vivienne turned. Mrs. Delphine Marchand was 30 years old, blonde, and wearing a pelisse that cost more than Vivienne's quarterly rent at 15 Belmore Lane. She was precisely as Vivienne had imagined from 5 months of watching through a window, composed, assured, the practiced confidence of a woman who believed she held the higher card. "I am," Vivienne said. "I have seen you at the window." Delphine tilted her head slightly, the way a woman does when she's performing curiosity rather than feeling it. "You watch the street a great deal." "I enjoy the view." Delphine smiled. "The Duke visits me every Thursday. I suppose you have noticed." Vivian set down the ribbon. 5 months of Thursday tallies. 5 months of watching a solicitor arrive at number 14 with a ledger under his arm and leave 2 hours later with a satisfied expression. 5 months of building a case she believed would indict not just the solicitor, but the Duke himself. The man who had received her father's letter and done nothing, or so she had concluded, in the careful darkness of her rented rooms, with only the evidence for company. "I know," Vivian said. "I chose your address." Delphine's smile faltered. "I beg your pardon?" "I rented number 15 because number 14 is listed in the Duke of Thornfield's estate accounts as a household maintained for his private use. £200 a year, 12 years. But the man who visits you on Thursdays is not the Duke. It is his solicitor, and the Duke does not know you exist." Neither of them had heard the bell above the door. "What did you say about my accounts?" The voice came from 3 feet behind Vivienne. Deep, direct, the voice of a man accustomed to asking questions and receiving answers. Vivienne turned and found Lord Nathaniel Hale, Duke of Thornfield, standing just inside the milliner's doorway in a dark coat, rain still on his shoulders, with the expression of a man who had stepped inside to avoid the weather and found something considerably worse waiting for him. She had studied his likeness in broadsheets. She had memorized his schedule, mapped his movements, built a theory of his complicity that this moment was about to test. He was taller than the broadsheets suggested, and his face held none of the comfortable indifference she had assigned him in her imagination. He looked, she registered with something approaching alarm, genuinely startled. "Your Grace." She kept her voice level. "Your solicitor has been stealing from you for 12 years. I can prove it. But not here." "Why not here?" "Because I also believed you knew about it. I am no longer certain, and I will not accuse a man I may be wrong about in a hat shop." He looked at her steadily. He looked at her. She looked back. She had spent 5 months learning to read the Thornfield accounts for signs of fabrication, the entry that was too neat, the figure that balanced too precisely, the wine merchant whose receipts never quite matched the delivery schedule. She applied the same attention to his face now, looking for the discrepancy that signals performance, and found only a man who was genuinely trying to understand what had just been said to him. "Then where?" he asked. "When I have finished deciding whether you are guilty or merely negligent, I will tell you." She walked out. The bell rang above the door, a small, clean sound, like a verdict delivered without drama. Nathaniel watched her cross the street toward Belmore Lane through the milliner's window, her back straight, her pace unhurried, carrying her case the way she apparently carried everything. Alone, in silence, without asking permission. He turned to Delphine Marchand, who had gone the color of new plaster. "Mrs. Marchand?" he said. "Who told you I was your patron?" Delphine opened her mouth, closed it. Then, in a voice stripped of all its practiced confidence, Mr. Graves said, "He said you valued discretion, Your Grace. He said you preferred not to meet directly. He handled everything? The house, the allowance, He said the curtains were your preference, the burgundy ones." "I have never chosen a curtain in my life," Nathaniel said. He went directly to 14 Belmore Lane. Delphine admitted him with the stunned compliance of a woman whose understanding of her own life had just been removed from beneath her, like a rug pulled cleanly from a floor. The house was well furnished, better than well, in the manner of someone who had spent money carefully enough to suggest taste, without inviting scrutiny. The drawing room held a writing desk Nathaniel recognized as Sheraton. A set of wine glasses he was fairly certain came from a merchant in Southwark, and curtains that were, in fact, burgundy. On the side table near the window, a delivery schedule written in a hand Nathaniel had seen on 30 years of quarterly reports. Graves's handwriting, neat, precise, the handwriting of a man who trusted his own authority. Thursday, wine, half case. Thursday, coal, 2 scuttles. Thursday, Mrs. Marchand's allowance, 4 pounds. Every Thursday, for 5 years, according to the dates on the schedule. Nathaniel stood in the drawing room of a house he had never entered, reading a schedule written by men he had trusted completely, and felt something shift in his understanding of his own household that he suspected would not shift back. He had never been in this house. He had never met this woman. He had never chosen these curtains. He crossed to number 15 and knocked. A pause. Then, from the other side of the closed door, a woman's voice, calm, deliberate, the voice of someone who had made a considered decision not to open it. "Your Grace." "Miss Wyatt, I have just read the delivery schedule at number 14. I would like to hear what you know." "I'm certain you would," Vivian said through the door. "Did you receive a letter from Leonard Wyatt?" Nathaniel paused. "I don't recognize the name." "That is either a lie or the beginning of an answer," she said, "and I cannot yet tell which. So I will not open the door. I am a duke standing in a public street. You are also a man who may have received my father's letter and chosen to do nothing about it. If that is the case, I would prefer to have this door between us while I decide what to do next." A carter rolled past on the cobblestones, his horse's hooves loud in the quiet of the lane. The man glanced at Nathaniel with the mild curiosity of someone who has seen stranger things than a duke standing on a doorstep in October, and continued on his way. Nathaniel remained where he was. "Your father wrote to me?" 6 weeks before he died. He had identified 4 phantom expenses in Mr. Graves's management of the Thornfield estate. He wrote to you because he believed a man of your position would act on the information. The letter never produced a response. My father died. I concluded that either the letter did not arrive, or you received it and chose the more convenient course. And which did you conclude? The silence on the other side of the door had a particular quality. The silence of someone choosing words with care. the way a person chooses which document to present first in a disputed case. I concluded, Vivian said at last, that powerful men tend to protect their own arrangements. That a letter from a forensic accountant who was not a gentleman, not a member of the bar, not a person of consequence, would be easier to discard than to act upon. I built my case on that conclusion. I am not yet certain I was wrong. You were, he said. You would say that regardless. He stood in the street for a long moment. The October light was failing, and the lamplighter had not yet come. Number 14 sat across the lane with its burgundy curtains and its 5 years of invented Thursdays. And number 15 sat with its closed door and its occupant, who had chosen this address with the precision of a woman who trusted nothing she had not verified herself. I will find another way to prove it, he said finally. I expect you will, Vivienne said through the door. Good evening, Your Grace. He walked away. She did not open the door. She went to her desk, opened the observation log to Thursday's page, and wrote the day's entry in a hand that did not tremble, because she had decided it would not. The following morning, Nathaniel summoned Graves to the Thornfield estate office and asked him, directly and without preamble, about 14 Belmore Lane. Graves was 60 years old, meticulous, and had managed the Thornfield accounts since Nathaniel's father was alive. He received the question with the composure of a man who had prepared for it. A private arrangement, Your Grace, Graves said. Established by your late father. A widow in reduced circumstances. Your father felt a responsibility. He asked me to handle it quietly, as he did not wish to distress your mother. My father died 8 years ago, Nathaniel said. The schedule at number 14 is dated 5 years back. Your father established it 10 years prior. The current schedule reflects a reorganization of the arrangement after his passing. I continued it as I believed he would have wished. Graves set his hands flat on the desk, the gesture of a man presenting his own steadiness as evidence. I apologize that I did not bring it to your attention directly. I judged it a matter of discretion. The lie was smooth. It was the smoothness that made it effective. 30 years of institutional authority, every magistrate and banker in the county prepared to believe him, and nothing in the accounts to disprove it without the letter that had never arrived. Nathaniel returned to number 15 that afternoon, and this time Vivian opened the door. The rooms were not what he had expected. He had imagined something provisional, a temporary lodging arranged in haste, the rooms of a woman who had not planned to stay. Instead, the front room held a desk positioned precisely at the window that faced number 14, a chair worn at the arms from sustained use. And on the wall beside the window, 5 months of observation in Vivian's careful hand. Thursday tallies, delivery logs, a column of figures she had mapped against the Thornfield accounts, with annotations in a smaller script that required him to lean close to read. Sit, she said, or stand. But if you're going to read it, read all of it. He read all of it. It took 40 minutes. She made no commentary while he read, and he asked no questions until he had finished. You built this against Graves, he said. I built it against Graves and against you, she said. I was not certain where one crime ended and the other began. The phantom expenses are in your accounts. Someone authorized them. I did not know whether that someone was Graves acting alone or Graves acting with your knowledge. And now? Now I have less certainty about you than I had yesterday morning, which is not the same as being certain you are innocent. She sat across the desk from him, her hands folded on the observation log. Graves told you it was your father's arrangement. Yes, he said, and you cannot disprove it without the letter my father sent, which Graves intercepted, which means Graves has constructed a position that is unfalsifiable without evidence he controls. She looked at him steadily. You are in the same position I was in when I rented this room. You believe something that cannot be proven with what you currently have. Then we have the same problem, Nathaniel said. We have related problems, Vivian said. They are not yet the same. He set down the log. He stayed in the chair. Neither retreated and neither conceded. But the door between them was open now, literally and otherwise. And both of them understood that what had passed between them in the last 20 minutes could not be taken back. The letter from St. Bartholomew's arrived on a Tuesday. Vivian read it standing at the desk, and her hands, which had been steady through 5 months of Thursday tallies and 2 days of a Duke's unsettling scrutiny, were not steady now. The accusation was specific and fabricated with the precision of a man who knew exactly where to press. Leonard Wyatt, it stated, had been dismissed from his position at the Hargreaves Merchant House for falsifying accounts. His son Thomas, currently apprenticed to the surgical staff, was therefore the son of a disgraced professional, and the hospital board was reviewing whether the apprenticeship could continue. Thomas had 10 days. Nathaniel entered. He had taken to arriving mid-morning, as though the investigation had established its own timetable, and found her at the desk writing to Dr. Hargreaves in a hand that was not quite her own. He did not take the quill. He pulled a chair beside hers, sat, and placed his hand under the inkwell, holding it steady while she wrote. Their hands worked in parallel, hers forming words across the page, his keeping the ink from spilling when her grip tightened. She finished the letter. She set down the quill. Thank you, she said. Your hand was shaking, he said. I know. It does that when someone threatens my brother. She did not look away from the letter. Thomas is 19. He has wanted to be a surgeon since he was 12 years old. My father paid his first year's fees from money he had saved for his own retirement. The accusation is false. My father was never dismissed from anywhere. But false accusations in writing, delivered to the right board at the right moment, are as effective as true ones. Graves, Nathaniel said. Graves found out who I am. Probably through Mrs. Marchand's maid. I was not as invisible as I believed, apparently. She folded the letter and pressed the seal. He knows the case I am building. He is compressing the timeline. She visited Thomas at his lodgings near the hospital that afternoon. He was 19 and frightened and working very hard to perform composure for his sister's benefit, which made her chest ache in a way she did not have words for. Dr. Hargreaves met her in the corridor outside Thomas's room and told her quietly that the sealed evidence packet Leonard had prepared, the original documentation of the 4 phantom expenses assembled before his death, was still in Hargreaves's possession, held against the day someone would have the standing to use it. Your father was the most honest man I knew, Dr. Hargreaves said. He believed the evidence would speak for itself. Find the power he could not. That night, Vivian and Nathaniel worked through the Thornfield accounts at his estate office until the candles were down to their last inch. She had brought her father's magnifying glass and used it on the entries she had flagged in her own logs, cross-referencing against the originals Nathaniel pulled from the estate files. Here, she said, placing her finger on a column. The wine merchant in Southwark, billing quarterly since 1804. But the merchant closed in 1810. How do you know that? Because my father audited their books in 1809. He attended the owner's funeral in March of 1810. I have his notes. She moved the magnifying glass down the column. Graves has been billing a dead merchant for 12 years. The money goes somewhere. We need to find where. Nathaniel leaned over the ledger beside her. What else? The parish school donation, £5 annually, listed as charitable giving for the Thornfield estate. I spoke to the vicar at St. Anne's 3 weeks ago. He has never received a donation from the Thornfield estate. Graves attends that church. They looked at each other across the ledger. Vivienne set down the magnifying glass. "What if I am wrong about some of it?" she said. "What if grief is making patterns where there are none? If I want this to be true because it would mean my father was right, and I am finding evidence to support what I already believe, rather than following the evidence to wherever it leads?" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "You have been counting for 3 hours," he said. "I have watched you work. You go back, you check. When a figure does not confirm your expectation, you write a question mark, not a conclusion. That is not what grief looks like. Everyone makes errors." "Then teach me to check your work," he said. "If the pattern is real, it will survive a second set of eyes. If it is not, we will find out together rather than alone." She looked at him across the candlelit ledger and felt something in her careful, evidence-built understanding of this man develop a quality she had not anticipated. She picked up the magnifying glass and handed it to him, and began to explain. She reached across the desk the following night to point at the parish school entry, and her sleeve brushed his hand. She pulled back, instinct. The reflex of a woman who had been working in isolation for so long that proximity itself felt like a variable she had not accounted for. Then she placed her finger back on the entry. Deliberately. Her wrist came to rest against his forearm, and she left it there. "Here," she said. "The £5 donation. Dated the 3rd of every November. The vicar told me he has never received it. The money does not go to the parish. It goes into the same account as the wine merchant billings, a holding account at a bank in Cheapside that Graves controls directly." Nathaniel looked at the entry. He did not move his arm. She could feel his pulse at the inside of his wrist. Steady, slower than hers. The pulse of a man who was paying attention rather than performing calm. She finished the explanation and removed her hand. Neither of them mentioned it. Graves arrived at the estate office the following morning without being summoned. He was wearing his professional composure like a second coat, and he addressed Nathaniel without looking at Vivienne. "Your Grace, I feel it is my duty to inform you of certain facts regarding Miss Wyatt's activities." He set his hat on the table with the precise confidence of a man who has rehearsed this moment. She has been surveilling the Thornfield household at Belmore Lane for 5 months. She rented rooms directly across the street specifically to watch the property. More significantly, and I say this with regret, she initially believed that you yourself were complicit in any irregularities she suspected. She was building a case not merely against me, but against you. He turned to Vivienne then, giving her the floor with the generosity of a man who knows the floor is a trap. Nathaniel turned to her as well. "Is this accurate?" "Yes," she said. She did not qualify it or soften it. "I believed you were part of the fraud until 12 days ago. The evidence in the accounts pointed toward either your direct involvement or a degree of negligence that amounted to the same thing. I was wrong. The evidence, when I had access to your full records, eliminated you." "The evidence," Nathaniel said. "Yes," she said. "Not trust." She met his eyes. "I trust evidence. I do not yet trust people. I am working on it." He was quiet in a way that was not anger. She'd seen his anger, direct and immediate. The anger of a man who says exactly what he means. This was something else. He set down the ledger he had been holding and did not pick it up again. Graves left, looking satisfied. Nathaniel did not return to the estate office that afternoon. Vivienne remained at the desk and continued auditing the accounts, because the work was still the work regardless of whether anyone was watching. And she had never needed an audience to do what needed to be done. But the chair across the desk was empty, and the empty chair had a particular quality that she found difficult to ignore. He came back the following morning, He said nothing about the day before. He sat down and asked her to show him the Cheapside account records. She showed him. They worked in silence for an hour, and the silence was not comfortable, but it was functional. And she told herself that functional was sufficient. She was not entirely sure she believed it. Vivienne arrived at Thornfield unannounced the next afternoon and asked, through the footman who admitted her, to speak with the Duke. Nathaniel came to the hall himself, rather than sending word. "One question," she said. "Not an accusation. A question. Did you ever receive a letter from Leonard Wyatt?" His confusion was immediate and specific. Not the performed confusion of a man buying time, but the bewilderment of a man encountering a name that means nothing to him. "Who is Leonard Wyatt?" She read his face the way she read accounts, looking for the entry that does not match the surrounding figures, the detail that arrives too smoothly. There was no such detail. His confusion was genuine, and it was specific. And it was the answer she had come here to find. "Leonard Wyatt was my father," she said. "He was a forensic accountant. He identified the phantom expenses in the Thornfield accounts, the wine merchant, the parish school, the stable in Hampstead, the property at Belmore Lane. He wrote to the Duke of Thornfield because he believed the Duke would act. The letter never produced a response. My father died 6 weeks after he sent it." Nathaniel was very still. "Graves handled my correspondence." "Yes," she said. "He did." They arrived at the same conclusion at the same moment, and neither of them said it aloud, because it did not need to be said. The letter had never reached him. Graves had intercepted it. And 6 weeks later, Leonard Wyatt had died of a sudden illness that Vivienne had spent 5 months trying to prove was not natural. "Thomas's apprenticeship has been suspended," she said. "Graves used a fabricated accusation that my father was dismissed for falsifying accounts as leverage. Thomas has 9 days remaining before the board makes its decision permanent." Nathaniel sat down. He was a man who stood as his default. She had noticed this, the way he occupied space with the confidence of someone who had never needed to make himself smaller. The act of sitting down was not a small thing. When he looked at her, the quality of his attention had changed. The wariness that had been present in his face since the milliner's shop, the careful assessment of a man trying to determine another person's angle, was gone. What replaced it she could not name precisely, but it was the expression of a man who has just understood the full shape of a betrayal and is mapping its dimensions for the first time. "We need to move quickly," he said. "Yes," she said. "We do." She went to Delphine Marchand the following day. Delphine admitted her with the expression of a woman who has been waiting for this conversation since the milliner's shop, and has spent the intervening days deciding how to receive it. Vivienne sat across from her in the drawing room of number 14. The Sheraton desk, the burgundy curtains, the wine glasses from the Southwark merchant who had been dead for 12 years, and laid out the fraud plainly, without softening it. Delphine's first response was silence. Not the silence of shock, but the measured quiet of a woman mentally reviewing 5 years of her own life, with new information applied to every entry. Then, "He told me the Duke preferred burgundy because it held the light in the evening. He said—" She stopped, started again. "He brought me a book of fabric samples. He said the Duke had chosen specifically. He came every Thursday and asked how the household was running, and I told him, and he made notes. I assumed the Duke reviewed those notes. I thought someone was reading them." "Someone was," Vivienne said. "Mr. Graves, to ensure the fiction remained consistent." 5 years. Delphine looked at the curtains. "I have been performing a life for a man who does not exist. Every Thursday, every delivery, I chose that writing desk because Mr. Graves said the Duke preferred Sheraton." She turned back to Vivienne. "What do you need from me?" "Your testimony," Every Thursday you can remember, every instruction Graves gave you, every delivery, every invented preference, all of it. You will have it, Delphine said, and her voice had the particular quality of a woman who has located her fury and decided exactly where to direct it. Graves sent men to number 15 the following afternoon. Vivienne returned from Thornfield to find her rooms scattered. The observation logs taken from the desk, the Thursday tallies removed from the wall, the filing boxes overturned. She stood in the doorway and looked at the displaced papers and felt the specific exhaustion of a person who has been careful for 5 months and has discovered that careful is not the same as safe. She sat down on the floor among the papers, not because she needed to sit, but because the floor was where the pages were, and the pages still needed to be sorted. Nathaniel arrived 20 minutes later. He surveyed the room, then sat down beside her on the floor without being invited, which was so thoroughly characteristic of him that she almost smiled. They took the observation logs, she said. What did they not take? Delphine's testimony. Mr. Poole's notes. I don't have those yet, but Graves doesn't know that. The sealed packet Dr. Hargreaves is holding. The cheap side account records we copied last night. She picked up a scattered page and looked at it. The critical evidence was never here. I kept this room as a working surface. The foundation was always elsewhere. Nathaniel took her right hand, turned it palm up, ran his thumb across the ink stains on her fingers, the permanent marks of her profession, the blue-black evidence of 5 years of other people's numbers. Graves would not send men to ransack the rooms of a woman who is wrong, he said. He ransacks the rooms of a woman who is right and who frightens him. She closed her fingers around his thumb, held on. 1 minute, perhaps slightly longer. Then she released his hand, picked up the page she had been holding, and returned to sorting. He stayed on the floor beside her, and when she handed him a stack of papers to organize by date, he took them without comment and began. That same evening, Mr. Poole arrived. He was the Thornfield estate steward, a quiet man of 50 who had managed the grounds and the tenant accounts with the invisible competence of someone who has never needed recognition to do his work well. He set a leather folder on the table without preamble. 7 years, he said. I noticed the discrepancies 7 years ago. Small things, a delivery that did not match the invoice, a payment to a supplier I could not locate. I wrote them down, not for anyone, for my conscience. He looked at Nathaniel. I did not bring them forward because Mr. Graves has managed this estate since before you were born, Your Grace, and I am a steward. I did not believe anyone would take my word against his. He looked at Vivienne. I am bringing them forward now. Nathaniel opened the folder and read in silence. 7 years of a steward's private accounting, written in the careful hand of a man who had been waiting, without knowing he was waiting, for exactly this moment. Thursday evening. The drawing room of 14 Belmore Lane held 4 people, and the accumulated evidence of 12 years of fraud. Vivienne at the desk, Nathaniel standing by the window, Delphine seated near the fireplace with her hands folded in her lap and 5 years of Thursday testimony ready in her memory, and Poole in the corner with his leather folder on his knees. The key turned in the front door at 7:30, precisely on schedule. Graves entered, saw the room, and stopped. He scanned them, 1, 2, 3, 4, and his composure held. 30 years of institutional authority do not collapse at the sight of 4 people in a drawing room. He set his hat on the hall table, the way he always did, and moved into the room. Your Grace. He addressed Nathaniel directly, managing to make the greeting sound like a question about jurisdiction. Whatever has prompted this meeting, I am certain it can be resolved through proper channels. Sit down, Mr. Graves, Nathaniel said. Graves did not sit. He turned to Vivienne instead, and his eyes moved across the room with the calculation of a man identifying his most useful weapon. Your Grace, I feel compelled to point out. This woman surveilled your household for 5 months while believing you personally were complicit in fraud. She rented those rooms to gather evidence against you. Is this the person you have chosen to trust with your accounts? Nathaniel was quiet for a beat. The room held that quiet the way a drawn breath holds. Delphine's hands tightened slightly in her lap. Poole did not move, and Vivienne watched Nathaniel's face and waited. She was wrong about me, Nathaniel said. She was right about everything else. He turned to Delphine. Mrs. Marchand. Delphine stood. She was not the composed, practiced woman from the milliner's shop. She was something steadier than that, a woman who has located the precise center of her own anger and is speaking from it. Mr. Graves visited this house every Thursday for 5 years, she said. He told me I was kept by a gentleman who valued discretion and preferred not to meet directly. He selected these curtains. He brought me fabric samples and told me the Duke had chosen specifically. He invented a man's preferences, his taste in wine, his preferred hours, his supposed fondness for this particular street. And I performed that man's household for 5 years without once questioning whether the man existed. She looked at Graves with an expression that required no narration. The Duke of Thornfield has never been in this house. I have been living in a fiction Mr. Graves constructed. I would like to tell the magistrate about every Thursday I can remember, beginning with the first. This woman is I am a widow who was deceived, Delphine said. There is a distinction you are very familiar with, Mr. Graves, because you drew it yourself. Poole spoke from the corner. I have noted discrepancies in the Thornfield accounts for 7 years. I am placing those notes on the table now. He set the leather folder on the table Graves had furnished with stolen money. I kept them for my conscience. I am producing them for the record. Graves looked at the room, the drawing room of the house he had built, the furniture he had chosen, the woman he had installed, the steward whose silence he had relied upon, occupied now by the people he had used and the man he had robbed. The total, Nathaniel said. Across 14 Belmore Lane, the wine merchant, the parish school, the stable in Hampstead, and the holding account at Cheapside is £6,432. Miss Wyatt calculated it. My father's estate steward confirmed it. Your own ledgers, subpoenaed this morning by Magistrate Alderton's office, will confirm it again. I will consult my solicitor, Graves said. Your solicitor has been informed? Mrs. Marchand's testimony and Mr. Poole's notes were delivered to Magistrate Alderton before noon. The Cheapside account records were delivered at 2 o'clock. Nathaniel's voice held the directness that had frustrated Vivienne when she first heard it through a closed door, and now struck her as the most honest sound in the room. You will not leave this house tonight, carrying anything that belongs to my estate. Graves moved toward the door. He tried the handle. Poole had locked it, not theatrically, not with any visible satisfaction, but with the simple efficiency of a man completing a task he should have completed 7 years earlier. The magistrate's men arrived at 8 o'clock, after they had gone, and after Delphine had been escorted to the lodgings Nathaniel had arranged for her, and after Poole had taken his folder and walked back to Thornfield in the autumn dark. The drawing room was empty, except for 2 people, and the furniture Graves had selected with money that was never his. Vivienne stood at the window that faced number 15, her own window, seen from the inside for the first time. She had looked at this room from across the street for 5 months. She had watched deliveries arrive and curtains be drawn, and a woman perform a life for an invented man. She had built her case in the dark of number 15, and now she was standing in the room she had watched, and it was empty, and her father's name had not yet been cleared in any record. And Thomas had 9 days that were now, as of this evening, resolved in his favor by a letter Nathaniel had sent to the hospital board that afternoon. The fraud was exposed. Her father was still dead. Nathaniel stepped forward. She did not step back. She placed her ink-stained hand flat against his chest and felt his heartbeat under her palm. Steady, present, the heartbeat of a man who had spent the last 10 days dismantling his own certainties and had not once pretended otherwise. "I was wrong about you," she said, "for 5 months." "I did not see you for 5 months," he said. "We are not even." "No," she said, "but we are starting." She kissed him, not slowly, not tentatively, but with the decision of a woman who has examined the evidence from every angle and reached a conclusion she is prepared to act upon. When they parted, the drawing room held the silence of a house that had finally been told the truth, and outside the window, number 15 sat dark and empty, its purpose complete. 1 week later, Vivian was packing the last of her father's papers when Nathaniel knocked at the front door of number 15. She admitted him herself. The room was nearly empty. The desk cleared, the observation window bare. The Thursday tallies gone from the wall. The chair worn at the arms from 5 months of sustained watching sat beside the window for the last time. "You are leaving," he said. The address served its purpose. She folded a sheaf of her father's notes and set them in the box. "Thomas's apprenticeship is restored. Your letter to the hospital board arrived on Monday. He sent me a note that contained 3 different spellings of the word gratitude, which is how I know he wrote it himself and did not ask anyone to help. Where will you go?" "Thomas's lodgings until I find new accounts to audit. There is always work for someone who knows how to read a discrepancy." She picked up the last folder. "Merchant houses, primarily. The work is less dramatic than this." "I have accounts that need rebuilding," Nathaniel said, "which is different work from auditing. Different work requires different qualifications." "The qualification I require," he said, "is someone who will tell me when the figures are wrong and not adjust them to suit my preferences. In 30 years of employing people, I have not found that person. You found it in the first hour." She held the folder and did not immediately answer. "I spent 5 months believing the worst of you. That is not a foundation for employment." "It is a foundation for honesty," he said. "You told me the worst thing you thought of me before you knew whether I was innocent. No one who has ever worked for my family managed that. They told me what I wished to hear and adjusted the rest accordingly." He looked at the empty desk, the bare wall, the window that faced number 14. "I am not asking you to pretend the last 5 months did not happen. I am asking you to stay long enough to be right about me, not about the man you assumed I was, but about the man you have been working beside for the past 10 days. She set the folder in the box. She looked at the 12 feet of cobblestone between number 14 and number 15. The gap she had built her entire investigation across, the distance between a crime and its exposure, the space that had held 5 months of patience, and one very significant error about a man who would have acted if the letter had arrived. "I will review your accounts," she said. "I will not pretend to certainty I do not have." "I would not believe you if you did," he said. Autumn settled over the Thornfield estate like a considered decision. Vivienne's desk stood beside the window of the estate office, positioned for the morning light, her father's magnifying glass on the blotter where she could reach it without looking. The accounts were in better order than they had been in 12 years, not perfect, because the damage Graves had done was real, and the repair was slow, and honest work does not pretend otherwise. But better. Measurably, provably better. Thomas came for Sunday dinner and filled the dining room with the particular energy of a young man whose confidence is returning to him after a fright. Louder than necessary, more cheerful than the situation strictly required, and completely himself in a way that made Vivian set down her fork and simply watch him for a moment. Nathaniel entered the estate office on a Tuesday afternoon in November and told her the magistrate had confirmed Graves's hearing date. "They want your testimony," he said. "They will have it." She set down the quill. "My father's name will be cleared in the record." "Yes," he said. She was quiet. The afternoon light came through the window at the angle it took in November, lower and more direct than autumn, and her father's magnifying glass caught it and threw a small circle of brightness onto the blotter. "He will not hear it," she said. "No," he said. "That is the part that does not resolve. The fraud is exposed. Thomas is safe. The accounts are being rebuilt. But my father is still dead. And no verdict changes that. And I knew when I rented number 15 that it would be true at the end." She looked at the circle of light on the blotter. "I chose this address because I thought if I could prove what he found, it would be enough. It is not enough. But it is what I have. And it is more than he had when he sent the letter." Nathaniel sat on the edge of her desk. She did not tell him to move. "Thursday," he said. She looked up from the magnifying glass. "What about Thursday?" "Graves visited Belmore Lane on Thursdays. I would like the word to mean something else. There is an inn at Wrenbury, the Lamb, on the Market Square. Neutral territory. Neither your address nor mine. Dinner, Thursday evening. I would like Thursdays to mean that instead." "You want to replace a word?" she said. "I want to replace what the word holds," he said. "At the moment, it holds 5 years of Graves' invented Thursdays, and 5 months of your observation logs, and 1 Wednesday afternoon in a milliner's shop. I would prefer it to hold something that belongs to us, rather than to him." She picked up the magnifying glass. Her father had used it for 30 years on disputed accounts, on entries that did not quite add up, on the fine print of agreements that concealed more than they stated. She had used it for 5 years after his death on the same work, and for 5 months specifically on the accounts of a man she had believed guilty of complicity in her father's ruin. She set it down, looked at Nathaniel without it. Without the instrument of scrutiny, without the professional distance, without the careful management of what she allowed herself to see. "Thursday," she said. The estate office held the ordinary sounds of an honest household going about its work outside the window. Pool's boots on the gravel path, a gate closing somewhere near the stables, a voice calling across the yard about feed for the evening. The accounts were open on the desk. The magnifying glass rested on the blotter. The circle of November light moved slowly as the clouds moved, crossing the page she had been working on, illuminating nothing in particular and everything that was there. She returned to the accounts. He stayed on the edge of her desk. Neither spoke. The silence between them was not the silence of strategy or caution, or the careful management of what one person allows another to know. It was the first silence she had permitted herself in 5 years that was not being used for anything at all. And she found, to her considerable surprise, that she had no desire to fill it. Outside, the Thornfield grounds made their ordinary, honest sounds. And the afternoon continued, and Thursday was still 4 days away.